Yep.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one sessions in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found on lifecoachddanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our 8th episode of Season 20, a very special guest, and with his incredible journey running 5 marathons in 5 different countries in 5 days. Mr. Dave Grange, and just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Dave, the floor is yours, my friend.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Dan, thank you so much. And it is awesome to connect with you and your stellar listeners today. So thank you. Well, diving into things, I am based out of Sun Valley, Idaho. So the mountain town of Idaho. And I grew up in Alaska, in Anchorage, and that's where I really grew to love, I'd say, pushing myself and challenging myself in the outdoors space. And so how this all came about, the 555, right? So I am married now. I have 4 kids under the age of 9. My wife has a business. I have a business. So we're both entrepreneurs, and things are busy, to say the least. And I am a performance coach by profession. And so as I work with so many people, I realize that things in their lives change, new jobs, relationships, we move. So these varying changes that happen in our lives, while those are changing, we oftentimes don't, right? We just stay in our same rhythm or our same routine, but that hinders us from achieving bigger things, from progressing, from growing. And so as I was coaching all these amazing people to perform at a higher level and to grow their businesses, grow as a person, transform, I was realizing as a coach, holy cow, I'm kind of playing it safe. I've kind of nestled into this nice routine or rhythm, but I realized I wasn't like fully lit up. I wasn't really stretching and really growing. And that's where I know I'm happiest. I'm happiest when I'm challenging myself and growing and learning new things about myself or about other people. So as this stirring was all going on for a while, I happened to be reading in the book, The Comfort Crisis. And it's a stellar book. And the basic idea being that it is natural for us to seek comfort. And we live in a very comfortable world where our climate can be controlled with AC and heat. And if we're hungry, most of us can go to the pantry and grab food immediately. And we have such an immediate gratification that it's really hindering us from really growing. And so one of the chapters it introduced me to the idea of misogi.
Okay.
And misogi is this Japanese term that literally translates to purification and cleanse. And the idea, as I was reading about it, was that you do something really hard during the year, at some point in the year, that it impacts all the other days that year. So it's got to be huge. It's got to have, they say, a 50% success rate.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
if you are training for a marathon, you can run a marathon. If you are training to do something hard and you train for that, you can do that. So the idea is to take that and stretch it to the see what's possible level. Now, I have grown up running and mountain biking and recreating in the outdoors. And for me, I think there's something pure about really pushing myself running because it's just your guts, your legs, your mind, and the trail. So I love the purity of that. And so I was brewing on this idea of misogi, of what can I do to really push myself. Oh, and a couple other things are with the misogi, it needs to be a solo experience. So it's not a group experience, it's a solo experience. It's got to have a 50% success rate. And it's got to be big. See what's possible. So long story short, I was brewing on this idea of how can I go to Europe? I've got 4 kids under the age of 9. It's hard to travel internationally with them at these ages. I know you can, but it's just not the most,
Yes.
easy experience, right? So I was thinking, how can I get to the Alps and see this incredible mountain range? And what if I trail ran, different sections of it? Long story short, it came together that I thought, what if I ran 5 unorganized trail runs, marathons, in 5 consecutive days across 5 of these countries that have the Alps spanning through it?
Mhm.
So that idea alone just lit me up. Just the idea of it was like, oh, here we go. And I had a spike in this motivation and excitement to train for something, to stretch myself, to push myself physically and mentally. And so that kicked things off. And then things really got serious when I bought the ticket. I
Yes.
bought the plane ticket to Switzerland, and I was like, okay, game on. Like, this is it. So I did a lot of map work. I picked different areas, different countries I wanted to do. And the routes I chose a zone in Interlaken, Switzerland, Chamonix, France, and then I drove across to the Italian Dolomites, and then the Austrian Alps, and then I ended in the Slovenian Alps and the Julian Alps. So it was this span through these 5 countries. The only one I didn't do is Germany. But I have these 5 countries, 5 areas mapped out. So flew into Switzerland, drove to my first area. And now I wasn't sure where I was going to sleep or how much time I would have. So I ended up sleeping in my car, actually, for the span of those times. The areas that I chose, the trails that I chose to run, I chose them 100% based off of beauty. I wanted to see the prettiest places in the Alps, and I didn't care how much vert there was, how many miles it would take to get. I wanted to see these ridge lines and these canyons and these valleys. And so I chose them based off of that, which hindsight, it would have been better to plan some easier runs because kicking things off in Switzerland, it said to be the deadliest and most challenging hike in Switzerland. And by the end of it, I did 8,000 vert in that marathon and across 26 miles, 26.2 miles. So some serious vert, like leg crushing vert. Now, I want to share one thing I learned on that one, because as I had this motivation to kick things off, I started this run. I actually went to church that morning in Switzerland because I wanted to have my mind right, my spiritual dose, before embarking on this journey. And so I started a little bit later than I intended to because I went to church, kind of bumped me back. And as a result, it was peak sun. It was hot. And a few miles into it, I was already at 3,000 vert. I mean, it was just straight up this mountain peak. And I thought, there is no way I can continue at this pace. Like, I'm hot. There's no water on this trail.
Oh,
And I'm on this dangerous ridge line. And all the warnings said, do not attempt this run if it's raining or wet, or this hike if it's raining or wet. The reason being because there's huge slopes, drop-offs, thousands of feet along this ridge line. And so if it's wet, your footing, slippery, etc. So don't attempt if it's raining or wet. Here I am running. I ran out on this ridge line. Now, one thing also that impacted me was people were hiking the other direction because it was an easier direction. I was going against the flow of traffic of hikers. And they would see me running this ridgeline and say, where are you going? Where are you going in their broken English? And I'd say, oh, I'm going to this spot. And they kept saying, you won't make it. Like, you won't make it. And they were meaning I wouldn't make it in time to catch the gondola ride down. But I wasn't intending to ride the gondola down. I was intending to ride or run. But what that did for me mentally was I had so many people saying, oh, you won't make it. You won't make it. And it just weighed on me, this pressure. So when we're attacking our goals, when we're wanting to go after something big in our lives, we will absolutely have people who don't understand the situation saying, you're not going to make it. Why are you doing this? And it was just weighing on me. And at one point I had to make the choice of, I almost played with the idea, what if I just do half marathons?
okay.
Right? That's still a challenge, 13.1 miles, like still a great challenge. But I knew my original goal was 26.2 miles across 5 countries in 5 days.
Mhm.
And so I thought about that for a moment of what if I just do half marathons? And I thought of the idea of coming home and feeling that. And it was like, no way. I can, even though that's a challenge, I know that's not my challenge. My challenge was 26.2. And so when the demons were weighing me down of the doubts and the uncertainties, I made that decision once and for all. I will not stop until I freaking finish this or I'm broken.
Oh,
And that
wow.
was it. And those demons, those doubts, those frustrations never showed up again.
But did
I
you
know,
did you have
yeah,
in mind like that TV show I Shouldn't Be Alive? Like because after a while, because like you said, other hikers went down, but eventually did you come to a time where you didn't see any more people?
yes, yes. Like the sun was setting and I was the only one on this ridge line. And I mean, there's more stories for later, but essentially when I was also running along this ridge line, a massive black cloud was swallowing the ridge line,
Okay.
pelting rain, lightning, and I'm the highest point on this ridge line. And at one point I was legit scared. Like I'm saying prayers to myself for safety, but unsure, like, do I go forwards or do I go back to that herd of cows and lay down next to them because they would be bigger conductors of electricity?
Correct.
I mean, that was my next option. Thankfully, the clouds kind of broke and I just decided to keep running for it. So there was legit like fear involved there where it was not only the grit of like running this thing and running 8,000 vert on a trail marathon unsupported, but it was dangerous. Like it was like, oh man, this is pushing me mentally, like on the safety factor from a big standpoint.
Mhm.
Now, people, I do want to share. I've grown up backpacking, recreating, doing multi-day sea kayaking trips. I mean, it wasn't like I was just out there taking uncalculated risks. This is coming from a place here. So I think it's important for everyone to know when you are trying to push into the unknown or see what's possible, you're building on hopefully a foundation that you've built for yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, you
And
gotta be smart about it.
yeah, you've got to be smart about it. It's got to be calculated. So with that all in mind, that kicked off Switzerland. So I finished the 26.2 mile run, and this is based off of my GPS watch that's tracking it. And so I finished that, made it back to my car. By that time, I was chasing the sunset. So I was finishing up as the sun was not only setting, but before dark set in. Because again, I started late.
Yeah.
So made it back, got in the car, drove to a pizza place, grabbed as much water and things as I could, and then I started driving to Chamonix, France. So drove a couple hours down the road, pulled over, folded the seats down in the back of the car, laid out a sleeping bag, and slept for the night,
Mhm.
and then repeat the next morning. Morning, woke up, drove the rest of the way to Chamonix, France, mapped things out, pulled some maps together. Long story short, did another 26.2 mile run, 8,000 vert. So on average, each of these marathons averaged 8,000 feet of elevation gain per marathon. So it by the end of it, I ended up doing 39,555 feet of elevation gain, which
Well,
is equivalent to doing Everest twice.
that's correct, exactly. Which is usually
That's
the height of a commercial airline, give and take.
yes. Yeah, totally. So it was definitely like a leg screaming, experience, but there's some of the details I wanted to share are well, and you might have the question on it too, but I ended up driving in between each country, self-support. I was jumping in rivers and lakes to cool off and also wash off. That was my bathing. Each of these marathons I would finish at night. Like I was racing the light because I was just on this continuous like running against the sunlight. And so I would finish a marathon and then I would find any place that was open for food. Oftentimes it was just gas stations
Mhm.
with, old hoagie sandwiches
Yeah.
or, any fruit or muscle milks I could drink. And it was, I mean, I knew it'd be hard physically, but I had no idea it would push me nearly to the breaking point mentally.
Mhm.
Um, the
The
reason being, it was unknown. The maps I was using were all in other languages. And in Europe and on these map systems, they wouldn't say this peak this way. I thought that's how it worked. This peak this way, this trail. But it would say ridgeline, peak, lake, bathroom, and it's all in another language. So I didn't know where it was guiding me. I was just matching words.
I
So
see.
constantly I was fighting this feeling of getting lost and being lost in another country in a deep mountain range alone. So that was definitely a factor, and also a transformational one where it forced me to rely on myself and my God. I'm a spiritual guy, and so it was me, myself, and the big man upstairs, on this journey.
So I'm sure that
And
a lot of those listeners are going to ask the question. First, how long did it take you for each marathon? We're talking about 4, 5, 6 hours. And how long was the drive between those countries?
Great question. The drive on average was about 3.5, 4 hours between each country.
Huh?
Um, the biggest drive was from Chamonix, France to the Italian Dolomites, which was 7.5 hours. So on that day, I had just a couple hours of sleep, and I woke up very early, like at 4 a.m., to then drive the rest of the way.
Okay.
So that was one of the harder ones. And then that one too, these were not organized like routes. These were routes that I put together. And when it's in another country, another map system. So the Italian Dolomites run ended up being a 30-mile run, strictly because I finished my 26.2, but I was on the backside of a mountain range. So I still had to run around. So that sometimes our goals look a little different too. We reach our goal, we're like, yeah, I did my, 26.2 miles. I crossed my finish line. Well, sometimes, the routes look a little different.
Mhm.
And so as we keep trekking on mentally and physically, there's more we can handle. There's more in the gas tank
Well,
than
another
we often.
question here, Dave. I mean, after those 39,000, feet of walking and running, etc., how many pounds did you lose? What was the after effect? Because did you look like a Holocaust survivor? I mean, what was exactly the outcome, and did it damage any organs because of that constant repetitive beating on your knees? Did you have an ACL replacement? What actually occurred?
Great question. And that from a spiritual and like miracle standpoint, that absolutely stands out. As I was physically, I didn't have one blister. I didn't have one hot spot. I didn't have any knee pain, ankle, no pain. I mean, typical aches from, running that far, but like I would sleep on it and I'd wake up next day ready to go. Which I'd never done. I've never done back to back. I've never done back to back half marathons or even 10Ks. This was a new experience for me. And that's where I just know I feel like I was protected almost. Given I trained hard, I wore, the right apparel, the right synthetic materials, but everything aligned for that. So I walked away from it with no injuries, I got off the plane and like walked, to the car, and my wife was there to pick me up with the kids. And she was like, man, I thought you'd be like hobbling off the plane, with an IV and
Yes.
and it was like, man, 2 days of travel, I've recovered. Like the
Wow.
body, the mind is incredible. And I realize, we all have different maybe health or physical or mental ailments or challenges. But each of us, there's so much more we have to give and to challenge ourselves and to see what's possible. This 555 was my misogi, was my challenge to see what I could do. I'm not saying you need to go run 5 marathons in 5 countries in 5 days, but seek challenge. Why would you challenge yourself?
Mhm.
And that's where the transformational part for me, on my runs through the Alps and along those single track, I had a lot of time to think and a lot of time to ponder. And I just kept thinking to myself, transformation is on the other side of challenge.
Mhm. That is
Whether it's self-imposed like mine was, or it's not. Sometimes we're diagnosed with something, or death or sadness or hard things happen. But I know without a doubt, transformation is on the other side of challenge, self-imposed or not.
I'm sure that a lot of
So
listeners here, Dave, are thinking of maybe Dave is a cyborg or like an organism that maybe may not exist on planet Earth because of doing what you did. So if let's say we could, tone it down and figure out exactly what would you
yeah.
suggest? for our listeners that may not be as healthy as you, or not be as challenged as what you decided to do to be able to really go through this transformative approach in your life.
Yeah.
Um, how can people start? I mean, with making those small changes or those baby steps to get to where
Yeah.
you want to be. Is there like a specific process that you would suggest?
That's a great point. I wouldn't say necessarily like, here's my 5-step plan to challenge yourself, but I would say be curious. It starts with the curiosity. And it starts, one, with the curiosity, and two, with the recognition of what's a unique ability of yours. You know,
Okay.
whether it's maybe in relationships or in your physical or mental space, but what do you desire? Where are you curious? What are you curious about? For me, I was like, I'm curious if I can run through the Alps to a degree. And then that curiosity, peeled back the layers and I identified my unique challenge.
Okay.
But for anyone, I'd say, what are you curious about professionally? Can you grow in this capacity? When I coach people with growth and they have consistent growth, and then like, all right, what's next? You
Mhm.
can grow in two ways: in volume or intensity,
Okay.
with anything, with volume or intensity. So that's where take something you love or take something you enjoy doing, and what can you see what's possible with volume or intensity, going further, harder, faster, longer than ever before. And I think of that from a professional capacity. What if I reached out to 2 new people every day for a month? Well, I've never done that. What if? I'm curious about that. So if you're curious about it, write it down, tell someone, call it a misogi, whatever you want, but design it and then commit to that. That's a huge one. So I'm even taking my own notes, but being curious, having the desire, and then commit. And that commitment is huge. When I bought that plane ticket, all of a sudden things got really real.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to Switzerland, I'm landing, so I can either go through this suffer fest, okay, or it can really be a bummer if I don't train.
That is so
But
true.
either way, go.
But
So
how do you feel, Dave, like when it comes to those changes? So before you left for Switzerland and when you got back, how did your wife or your kids notice a change beside exhaustion?
and I would say they didn't even notice exhaustion, because I had recovered, on my days back. If anything, they saw more vitality, they saw more energies, they saw more light and zest for life. Because in one of my training days, I remember coming back from a mountain bike ride, and then we were having dinner with our family, and my daughter, who's 5 or was 5 at the time, and she said, "Dad, you're always so happy when you come back from your adventures." Interesting.
Yes.
If a 5-year-old can notice a change in energy, a change in demeanor, and see that happiness, is that happiness because I was riding my bicycle?
Mhm.
Or is that happiness because I prioritized pushing myself, getting some movement in, pushing my physical and mental capacity for that hour or 30 minutes, whatever that was? And so that's a big motivator for me too, is why are you doing it? Is it just for you? And that's fine if it is. But everyone has ripples or circles of influence. And
Correct.
for me, my direct circle of influence are my 4 kids and my wife. So is it any wonder that while I was training for this and talking misogi and talking about pushing myself, is it any wonder that my kids would randomly like lace up their shoes and go run around the block a few times? And they'd come back and, "Hey, Dad, I ran 3 times around the block. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Yeah, I thought of a good challenge today. I can do this, I can do that." But you insert this culture around pushing yourself.
Mhm.
And as they say, we're a combination of the 5 people we're surrounded by most.
That is
So
so.
if I can be a powerful ingredient for my kids, for my wife, what a bonus. What a bonus. And for anyone listening, like, who are those 5 people around you? How would they be impacted if you were more lit up with life, more fully charged
Mhm.
as you navigate personal, professional, physical, mental challenges in your lives?
But
So,
were you like that, Dave, when you were young? Was there something that you had to prove not just to yourself, but to your family that you were as good as you wanted to be?
mm, great question. Um, I don't know. As I mentioned, I'm a spiritual guy, and so I believe, that we were divinely created, and we're created with limitless potential.
Sure.
And that doesn't mean we won't have obstacles, we won't have challenges, but we have potential to really do and be and think and create incredible things. And so I don't know if I ever had like a moment where I needed to prove myself, but I've always been curious about, if I've been created this way by a God who loves me, then how can I use what he's given me and grow it and challenge it and see what's possible? Now, I have a sister who just had a liver transplant, and she has had numerous health challenges for the past 25 years.
Wow.
And I look at her and I think, oh my gosh, like she couldn't even think to do a 5-5-5. That, as I said, that was my misogi, but her misogi, and I've watched her, but could be to have a good attitude with what life's dealt me.
Mhm.
When it's easy to say, woe is me, here's my challenges, and layer on all the crap. But instead, I'm going to take this crap or this hard challenge, and I'm going to have a killer attitude.
Is she your younger sister or older sister?
She's my older
Sister. Okay.
by 3 years.
Does she have the same approach to, let's say, based on her limited capacities, she can use still the same perspective as you have and have her own set of misogi, whatever you want to call it?
Totally. Because with what she has, with what she's been given, what is she curious about? Where can she plug in this curiosity with the desire to see what's possible? And then put a little commitment in there, do a little training, whatever that looks like for her, practicing every day, and then see what incredible thing you can accomplish.
That is amazing.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, wherever. So one of the big transformations, Dr. Dan, is when I think about what happened because of this experience, it really gave me, as I navigate my professional life, my personal life, my family life, I trained for, planned, and executed the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, easily. Hardest thing I've ever done, physically and mentally. Pushed myself and stayed in that zone of breaking for 5 days. So if I can do that, what else can I do? Like anything seems easy or simple. And yes, there's still daily challenges, but I think, oh man, it's heck of a lot better than being on 4th marathon, and sleep deprived and undernourished. And, it's like, man, if I can do that, I know I can handle this. I know I have data, I have experience pushing myself and doing that. So that's where I just invite anyone. Why do we challenge ourselves in this world of comfort?
Yes.
Why do we challenge ourselves? It's to prove to ourselves that we can handle bigger anything. Like we can handle anything.
So
we
what
truly
can
can.
like who seek your services as a performance coach, where can they find you?
Great thought. So I am active on social media. I'm active on Instagram at live.stellar is my handle there. If people want to reach out to me directly, they can do that via my website, livestellarco.com. Or they can even email me, dave@livestellarco.com. And I'd love to help them go big, tackle their challenges, have the physical practices that they need and the mental practices that they need to take on anything that they're wanting to be curious about and to see what's possible.
I love your energy, Dave. And that's all the
Thank
time
you.
we have for today's podcast as well. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your amazing story. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. And I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 20 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories just like the one that you listened today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Against all odds, you dare to chase the impossible, and now you stand victorious. Your journey is a testament to the extraordinary power of perseverance and belief in oneself. In the face of skepticism and challenges, You prove that passion and determination can defy even the most formidable obstacles. Your success is an inspiration to those who dare to dream beyond conventional limits, a reminder that resilience and tenacity can turn the unimaginable into reality. Celebrate your achievements, for you are living proof that the impossible is merely a stepping stone for greatness. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.